Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for joining us tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to tonight's virtual evening with Susannah Marren in conversation with Gigi Levangie, discussing Susannah's new book, A Palm Beach Scandal, published by St. Martin's Press. Susannah Marren is the author of Between the Tides and A Palm Beach Wife, and the pseudonym for Susan Shapiro Barish, who has written over a dozen nonfiction books, including Tripping the Prom Queen, Toxic Friends, and You're Grounded Forever, but First, Let's Go Shopping. For over 20 years, she's taught gender studies at Marymount Manhattan College and has taught creative nonfiction at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. She lives in New York City. Our moderator tonight is Gigi Levangie. Gigi is the author of several novels, including The Starter Wife, which was adapted for an Emmy Award-winning miniseries starring Deborah Messing, and Man-Eater, which was adapted for a Lifetime miniseries starring Sarah Chalke. In addition, Gigi wrote the screenplay for the movie Stepmom, starring Julia Roberts and Susan Sarandon. Love that movie. Her latest book, Been There, Married That, was published by St. Martin's Press in 2020. Remember that throughout tonight's broadcast, you can ask questions by pressing the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those right after their conversation. You can purchase A Palm Beach Scandal and Been There, Married That on the link below. Every purchase helps support Books and Books during these trying times, so we thank you. And now, without further ado, I'd like to bring our guests to the stage. Hi.
Hi.
Hi there.
How are you?
Happy
Susannah.
to be doing this with you tonight, Gigi.
Oh,
I'm a
so
longtime
pleased you
fan
asked
of your
me.
work.
And I am of yours as well. And I'm so pleased to be here in my bedroom. So let's go right in. I'll have a few questions for you, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. A Palm Beach Scandal. Great title.
Thank you.
Great title. It's about sisters, motherhood, baby craving, and a deep family secret. And that's not all it's about. But what made you choose this topic?
Well, having written nonfiction for so many years, I did a book on sisters. I've written a book on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law because we have that in the book as well.
Yes.
I've interviewed many women about their feelings as wives and mothers. And each of these relationships is so complex. I sometimes think that the relationships are hierarchical, and the sister relationship often comes before almost any other relationship. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to take these two sisters who, as you know, are quite disparate and 8 years apart, and I wanted to put them in a setting that's so beautiful and glamorous and supposedly perfect, and have them face real issues in a way that they never dreamed possible, that it would never happen to them.
You have quite a few surprises in there, for sure. Do you have sisters?
No, but my mother was the youngest of three, and I have two daughters with a son in the middle. And I have often felt, especially after doing the research on sisters, that if you don't have a sister, you're always looking for that kind of closeness among your friends. And if you do have a sister, there's nothing worse than having tension or friction in that relationship. And there's so much less need for friends in the way that we without sisters look for it.
Okay, you've just solved my own life crisis because
you have sisters, right?
I have three sisters.
Yeah.
I'm the third of four. So I'm like a middle child. But if I have a conflict with one of my sisters, it really affects my life from the moment I wake up until I go to sleep.
Oh, it's really hellish for women. And reading your novel, I really love the sister bond in your newest book. So
yes, sadly based somewhat on truth. So Palm Beach, let's talk about Palm Beach, because Palm Beach is really another living character in your novel. And how do you know this place so well? Are you from Palm Beach? Did you grow up there?
I grew up going there. My parents were residents for over 50 years.
Oh, well.
My father was a ranked tennis player in Florida, and for decades. And because of that, I really saw all different aspects of it, all different types of
Right.
Palm Beachers. He was really able to cross over the lines because tennis is so meaningful in Palm Beach. And I remember that what struck me so much about my mother's investment in Palm Beach, she just adored it until the day she died. She really had agency there. So even as she got older, the women in it, almost the opposite of California, where I know you live, if I dare say so. So
LA.
it's not, right, LA. It's not that the women weren't vain. It's that they always had some kind of power, even if the power was derived from the husbands, because it's a very materialistic world, as we know.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the way you describe the shops and the restaurants and yachts, I mean, it's a world, it's a whole other world. Does it exist like that today?
Yes, it's so rarefied, and it's so exquisite, and it's this beautiful barrier island with, as you know, if you read the book, the intracoastal and the ocean. But what lurks beneath? Because when I wrote a nonfiction book on why women keep secrets and lie, what I found was that more women than we think, a myriad group of women and a great amount of women pretend that everything is okay. So the question for this novel became, if you're in a place as perfect as Palm Beach is, could there really be unhappiness? And, could women really have such deep secrets, and could there be such rivalry? Yes. And the answer is yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, the same thing here in Los Angeles, whether it's Bel Air or Beverly Hills or Malibu, but not as rarefied. I feel like in your book. I mean, it made me nervous, the amount of money spent, but I love just stepping foot inside of it, and getting beneath the surface. That's really great for me. So what do you think your message is here? And there's a really strong message here about family and loyalty and keeping secrets from the outside world. What message do you want to convey about all those?
Well, one of the messages is that just because, and this is for Elodie, the older sister who's 40 in the novel.
I love her name, Elodie. I know a baby named Elodie.
I love that name. I really do, yeah. For Elodie, who's done everything the right way, she's really been the pleaser and the good girl, and she has a great career, and she has the husband everyone would want for themselves and every mother would want for her daughter.
She really
and
is.
There's certainly enough money, and she's very pretty, but she can't have a baby. And I say this without it being a spoiler, because it's only the start of the novel. This novel is about so much more. But because she can't, she feels so incomplete. And she never really questions how it feels for her, as much as she understands that the society expects her. This is her next step. So what are the prescribed roles for women? And who are we as individuals, apart from what's expected of us? So what is being a wife? What is being a mother? And why are we taught, even today, that this is such coveted stuff, that this is really having arrived?
Right. Do you think that's as important today as it used to be? I know quite a few women who've chosen not to have children. I've offered them mine. Not anymore. They're big and they're so easy now. But I say that today. But I feel like there's more and more women who are sort of choosing not to have children. But the way you write it, it's so painful for her not to have a baby after wanting one for so long.
It is, and she almost becomes immersed in the longing. It's almost as if she can't escape it. However, her sister is an example of a woman who doesn't really want a husband and has fallen into a good career, but certainly wasn't on the career path the way that
Right.
Elodie has been. And she really isn't interested in this conventional life, although she too was raised in Palm Beach and has been given the same message by the mother, Veronica, who's definitely part of, it's a triangle, right? It's the mother and her
Yes.
two daughters. So
Yes.
she really is thinking very differently about her life. And that's
Yeah,
an example of someone who doesn't have to have a husband and a child.
Exactly. She's more bohemian, more free living and all that. But it's the way the baby craving thing, the way you wrote it is so poignant.
Thank you.
Yeah, it actually pained me.
Oh.
So we asked if you have a sister, and you don't, which is so funny because you write it so well. So you must have really observed with
Well,
your
the
work.
study that I did on sisters, it's called Sisters Devoted or Divided. I listened to these women, and the sisters who are estranged are probably among the most miserable people in terms of relationships.
Oh, that's so sad.
And when they're estranged from their sister or sisters. And I also think that what's so interesting in terms of family systems, which I thought about when I wrote this novel, is how these two sisters expect when this decision comes about, and then the great secret of the novel, which we can't give away, but how differently they expect their mother to be based on each of them having a different relationship with the mother.
Yes, it's almost like they didn't even grow up in the same family. They're two separate people completely. And I feel that way having three sisters, the four of us, and we're all about 18 months apart. My poor mother. And my father stayed home and raised us after being a staff sergeant. And so we were really born, disciplined and all. But it's funny how absolutely different we all are. It's
That's what happens.
Yes. I mean, because there's millions of ways we could be, right? So, but
very distinctive,
Yes.
each child is so distinctive. And what I was really looking for here was, I think you mentioned it earlier, I was asking some really serious questions about what loyalty is. Loyalty to yourself, loyalty to your family, and how that breaks down. It's because we're each individuals. And so when this family has to face this great secret, they have such different reactions, and they have so many different investments in a secret.
Yes. And it's well, the end is surprising, but it makes sense at the same time. I'm not going to talk about it.
Surprise endings. People have asked me about that with my novels. And the reason that the endings, which I always know from the beginning, from when I start the novel, I'm not certain of every chapter to get there, but I'm certain of what the end will be. And the surprise ending really resonates for me, works for me when I'm writing the book as almost a guiding light, because I think that for women in particular, we never know exactly what life will be like, even though we're taught that if we do the right thing, we will get the right result.
Yes, we're going to get the right result. Our children will be perfect. If we put them in this nursery school, it's all set. And
taking the right steps for the right result. That's the implicit message, maybe even explicit, for females. And the arc of the female life for so many decades was that you were raised to be a good girl, you became a good wife, a good mother, a good grandmother, especially now with longevity. And that was the arc of the female life. And because life has changed so much, and because, as you say, no one has to necessarily have a child or be married, there are more choices for women, although not equal pay for equal work, but many, many more choices for women. And with that, in this novel, for example, look at Aubrey, the younger sister. What's foisted upon her and the decision she makes, which takes them on this journey. But I don't think anyone in the family would have expected it of her.
No, it was surprising, and yet it was organic.
Yes.
And that's a really hard line to walk there. because it was totally believable, and yet you didn't see it coming, you know?
Well, the other part of this novel is just what one's society means, what it means to us, how much we think that we're being judged and how judgmental women can be. And the irony is that almost everyone has her own secret, although it might not always be as profound as what happens in this novel. But so many of us pretend that everything's okay in order not to be judged. And so in Palm Beach, there's a lot of scrutiny, but it's everywhere that women feel scrutinized and judged.
Well, look at Instagram. I mean, even women, I thought I was past middle school or high school. And here we are back again, having to pose and having to look good and coming up with the right post and all that. And I think it's exhausting. And I think that women feel it much more than men do. I know my boys aren't that invested in social media.
I think it's much more difficult for girls and
I can't
women.
Imagine. Can you imagine growing up now and seeing like the bodies and what you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to like?
Well, there's never a break. There's never a break. And actually, Gigi, in the novel, I've been asked why I write about brands, people wearing certain brands. And even since you mentioned the scene with the yacht, that it's a turquoise, right? That kind of yacht for that party where some really crazy stuff happens, right?
Yes.
But the idea that everything is a label and that we will be satisfied from the outside in. And that and that somehow, in a very capitalistic, materialistic culture world, that we will be happy if we have all the goods. And clearly, one of my messages is that if only it could be that simple.
No, it's much harder. It starts on the inside and works its way out. But that's hard to convey, and it's hard to believe, and it's hard to buy into. I think especially today. Let me ask you this. You write nonfiction. I was curious about this even before I met you. Under your real name, Susan Shapiro Barash.
Yes, I do.
And fiction under your pen name, Susannah Marren. Can you discuss how your nonfiction, mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, the role of the wife in our culture, female rivalry, female infidelity, why women lie, sisters, informs your fiction?
Having listened to about between 300 and 500 women per study, per book.
Wow.
From all across the country. And it was very important to me that it was a diverse group of women, all different ages, social strata, ethnicity, religion, race, small towns, suburbs, cities, to find out what they longed for, what they really wanted. What is it that women really need and want in contemporary society? Right. And also what ageism is for women and what the societal expectations are at every age and stage. And what was so striking to me, Gigi, is that it really doesn't matter where you're from or, as I said before, what level of education you have. As I said before, the emotional needs of women are actually kind of universal. If you hate your mother-in-law, it really doesn't matter where you live. If your colleagues are really rivalrous, female colleagues, and there's a lot of that, which is disturbing. In my book, Tripping the Prom Queen, it's not so much what kind of job you have as much as it's the environment, the work environment, and it doesn't matter what kind of town it is. If you're having trouble with your sisters, we talked about, or you're uncomfortable in a sisterhood, then that's very difficult, and it really doesn't matter. And best, grandmothers and mothers who do retail shopping with daughters and granddaughters, it really doesn't matter if you're going to, on Rodeo Drive or you're going to Target. It's the same currency. So, so I'm really looking at women and how they feel, the faces they wear versus how they really feel. And that's what then gets put into into the fiction.
It feeds your fiction.
It really does.
Completely.
It fuels the stories. Yeah.
Wow, you have so many stories then to tell. It's like it's endless. I mean, I'm jealous because I would need to go out and interview 300 to 500 women. You know,
the positioning of women in our society continues to be both intriguing and on some level still very disturbing. I still think there's a lot of sexism, as I said a minute ago, a lot of ageism, and
oh yes, I know that one.
we all do, yeah.
I'm getting to know it.
Mm-hmm. And that's just the reality.
Yes, I think that I mean I remember being a young woman in television, you know, working in television, and being in my 20s still, and talking to writers who were in their 50s and 60s, female writers. And now that I'm here, I can see exactly where they were coming from. I understand, you know, how experience is not as valued as it should be. And maybe that's our culture.
And there's a lot of pegging of women. And actually, in writing Veronica, the mother in this novel, yes, I thought a lot about it, because even though she could have this perfectly luxurious life, until recently, till we get to the beginning of the novel, she's worked for a charity, and she's been the chair there, and she's volunteered her time, and it really matters to her. And that gives her some kind of voice of her own. Right. But she also, and women are looking for that, and it's very hard to come by. The pressure for her, and this is really surprising, when I did my research for A Palm Beach Wife, I found that many women on the actual island of Palm Beach, not across the bridge, not in West Palm or, you know, in Palm, you know, Palm Beach Gardens, but many of the women don't work. And that really surprised me. Now, this is anecdotal qualitative research. I'm not Pfizer, but in interviewing and listening, and I was really surprised at that. And so I purposely had Veronica have a job and a position and have her feel very pressured to not have that anymore at some point.
That's so interesting. When I lived in LA. I was living in LA. I've lived in LA my whole life, but for a time I moved to New York, and all of my LA girlfriends, basically they didn't have jobs. So they worked with charities and all that, nonprofits. But they weren't drawing a salary or anything like that. My New York friends all had big careers. It was so different. And I wondered about the culture of Los Angeles versus New York, and now Palm Beach. You know, can you speak to that at all? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I live in New York, and I see that most of my friends are very hardworking and have careers and feel very dedicated to that, and have struggled with the life balance of career and children and husbands and, you know, that whole pie of life. And in Palm Beach, well, actually, some of my friends do work, but when A Palm Beach Wife came out, I was at one of the big libraries at a fundraiser. I was asked to be, you know, the author at the table at the Mandel Library, and all of the women at the table spoke. They all lived in West Palm or Palm Beach Gardens, and they all spoke about how it was very specific to Palm Beach that the women weren't working as much. So it's really, you know, it's just, it's such a specific kind of place. But again, it goes to what kind of pressure women feel of all ages. Right. I mean, Aubrey, I would like to mention, really tries to stay away from the family. So part of this novel is about how and why she is drawn back in to the family, because she lives in South Beach, but when the family really needs her, she is unexpectedly present.
Yes.
You know, much more than
she's heroic.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk, where does Aubrey come from?
The name? Well, remember
the name and the woman, like she's so unique. I really want to know a little bit more about how you came up with
She's truly a free spirit. And she's been like that her whole life. And her family has really allowed it. So Elodie sort of resents, because we know that sisters often have some kind of resentment.
Yes.
So the family has sort of excused her.
Right.
She, because I do so much backstory on my characters before I actually put them on the page. I like notes and notes. And so Aubrey got into Cornell and went to Bard.
Yes, I noted that.
I think that,
Yes.
yeah. And I think that says a lot, because this is a family that really trades in a certain currency.
Right.
And so
Father went to Harvard.
He went to Princeton, and so did Elodie. Yeah.
Yes.
So all of this just tells you so much about a family and the kind of ambition that is set forth for each child. And I think that that's so real based on my research. And when I wrote my book, You're Grounded Forever, but First Let's Go Shopping, about mothers and daughters.
Love that title. Love it.
The mothers were saying that for those mothers who had both sons and daughters, they talked a lot about making more excuses for their daughters and than they did for their sons, and feeling more protective and more concerned. And so here we have a family of just two daughters. So Aubrey was supposed to be a boy, and that's how she got the name Aubrey. Her father really wanted it.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes people call her Audrey. But Aubrey really has been given kind of, the pass that so many times the boys get in families when they're boys and girls.
Interesting. I've only, my stepdaughter, I had a stepdaughter, but I've only basically raised boys. You have two boys? I have two boys, yes. So
it's very different.
It's they say you lose 4 months as a mother, you lose 4 months of your life for every boy you have.
Oh,
because of the physical.
I wonder what you lose having daughters.
Maybe a decade. I don't know. It depends.
But the one thing I wanted to say is that because there's so much privilege in Palm Beach.
Yes.
The pressure on Aubrey and Elodie to make this pact and to then find out what they find out, it really is what pushes the story forward. And when I spoke about loyalty before, it's not just loyalty to your family, but sometimes we don't really know our own moral code until we're put to the test.
Until we're tested, yes.
And these sisters are very tested by the secret. They're very tested in terms of who they are and what their ethic really is.
Right.
They kind of are awakened, and so is the mother. But we can't talk about the secret. But so this
I know.
So this is a novel really about a secret, a scandal.
Which is why it's called a Palm Beach scandal.
Exactly.
Yes?
No, go ahead.
Well, A Palm Beach Wife, your first of the Palm Beach novels, came out in April of 2019. That's just last year. This isn't exactly a sequel, but another tale that takes place in Palm Beach. Can you tell us how the books work together?
They're kind of accompanying tales about Palm Beach. And in this book, you see a few characters from the first novel, but they're not really intersecting. They're not, in other words, it's not a sequel. It's really a series, or as St. Martin's calls it, the Palm Beach novels.
I think it's great. I mean,
Thank you.
Do you have another in mind after this, after a Palm Beach scandal?
I'm working on one right now.
Really? Can you give us the title or not? I love it. Another Palm Beach. That's great. So this is a multi-generational story about a mother and her adult daughters. Tell us how you go about creating these characters and any characters. How do you do that?
I often look at my notes from my nonfiction and think about what women in real time, real live women are telling me about how they feel, particularly in my study about why women lie and have secrets. So the secret is the cause and the behavior is the lie. And women are very, really facile at that. And they're good at it because we live in a patriarchal culture where women have developed great skills. And if they have a secret, and also my study on female infidelity really informed me too, because women are so good at keeping that a secret if they need to. You know, some women use an affair as a way to renegotiate a marriage, but I found that for the women who have affairs and they're sort of like, you know, a good wife, you know, 6 days of the week, and the seventh day they sneak out with, you know, the children get picked up at school by someone else and they sneak out with their lover. So women are really good at that. And, you know, that's just something I really thought about. How has this family worked out the secret that's almost in the app? It's almost palpable and it's never there.
Right.
How has this mother, you know, the matriarchal figure, really managed what she manages? And so for that, I took a good look at my nonfiction.
Mm-hmm. Do you think she manages it so almost too well?
Well,
you know,
survival is so important.
Yes.
And so many, and that's another theme of this book. What is survival? Well, you know, we're not going to compare it to being a woman living in Afghanistan. I mean,
No.
But we're taking a look at what survival is in the culture that I placed these women and
Right.
the kind of anguish that comes with it.
I mean, I really felt that when there was gossip, you know, in a restaurant or in a certain setting, you could hear the voices, the gossip and all that. And that stuff is really debilitating, especially to characters like these.
It's so hard for women to feel that way, to feel that they're being measured or spoken about or excluded. Right. I did a study on female friendship, and I really thought about who are your friends in times of great need. And, you know, the female friendships are so complex too. And the hierarchy and power of some women in clans and cliques, and there's plenty of that in Palm Beach.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's plenty of it. There's plenty of it here on the West Coast.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters where you are. And I went, and it doesn't seem to get easier as you get older.
No, that's what I think it doesn't. I think that you are just put in a new environment or new sphere for females with the same mores and expectations. For instance, when I did my study on female rivalry, I interviewed grandmothers who were competing over their grown children and their grandchildren. And when their children were little, they competed, you know, about and through their children for years. Yes. And so I think it's an ongoing aspect of the female condition, that we have the same issue with friends and sisters and, you know, our mothers, if we all, you know, if they live a long time and colleagues, it just keeps perpetuating itself. Perhaps you're in a new town or it's a different stage of life, but these expectations and behaviors for women really persist.
I see it all the time. And it kind of makes me, as a writer, do you kind of go into your cocoon, because we have to have that alone time in order to create. And when I see that happening with my friends, I don't want to, I can't get involved, and I don't want drama at all. I mean, how do you function?
In terms of friends or in terms of the writing?
In terms of the friends, how does that affect your writing? How do you protect your writing from external forces? All of that stuff.
I think that, you know, I think in some ways that writers are really loners, and I think that they're also sometimes desperate people on some level, because you're alone writing for so long, and then your book comes out and here you are, you know, you're put
thrown out
there in the world, right? So I think that some friends really understand. And then I've a lot of friends who are writers also. And and they definitely understand it. But when the virus started and everyone was working remotely, I did read an essay, I think it was in the Times or an op-ed, and the writer said, I'm a writer, so I'm used to being kind of,
Yes, I remember that.
self-quarantined.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, welcome to our world.
I know.
Right? So we talked about the surprise ending. Now can you tell us about your writing schedule? Like, how long does it take to write a novel? How you go about planning the story? The day-to-day logistics. How do you attack the novel?
I try to write every day. I have read...
That's 6 days, 7 days, 5 days?
Every day.
Every day, yeah.
I mean, Saturday and Sunday are fungible. I mean, all the days are the same for me. I write every day, and I have read interviews with very famous writers, and sometimes I'm so impressed with how regimented their schedule is, or how they have the same hours and they just don't leave their desk and they write X amount of pages a day. It's not like that for me, probably because I've been writing all these years, and when I had little children, I just didn't have that luxury. Yeah. So I write every day. I do a lot of outlining for my novels. And I think that's because I come out of the nonfiction world. And for nonfiction, I really do need, I might not know the conclusion until I do the research. For instance, I have had a hunch that women stayed in toxic friendships longer than they needed to and didn't really have the guts to leave. That it was easier to break up with a boyfriend or get divorced. Yeah. So I kind of felt that, but I still needed to do all the research. So it was a very detailed outline to write that book. And for a novel, as I said, I always know the end, but I do an annotated chapter outline, and I know some novelists don't, but I really like to have that kind of structure to look at.
I like structure, and then because I like to know, because when you're writing a screenplay, there's a structure, there's a paradigm. You can't go over this number of pages, or this amount of dialogue per page. So I come from that, and I do like an outline.
For your fiction, you do that too.
For fiction, yeah. But I think a loose outline allows you to kind of go off on a tangent if it appears.
I agree. Or move things around if you need to, the order of things. But I think that writers who don't get to write every day and are okay with it, it sounds great, but the writing is so important. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not the same if I don't write at least 5 days a week.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So do you want to take some questions?
Sure.
Susannah. Okay. Let's see if I do this right. Ask a question. Oh, congratulations, Susan. Hi, Gigi. Should we expect to see many more novels in the same universe with these same characters from you? From Cole Dennis.
Some of the characters will keep going, but the novel I'm working on now has actually a new bunch of characters.
Wow. Okay.
So, but we will overlap a bit.
Okay, great. Next question. Would you ever consider writing something from a totally different era? Have you ever? This is from Elizabeth.
I would love to do that. I love historic fiction. Yes. I love period pieces.
I think you'd be so good at that.
Well, because I'm a researcher, I would love to do it. And I have attempted a few novels. I don't know about you, Gigi, but I have a few novels that I wrote so long ago that they're not like on a PDF. They're really like in manuscript boxes from back in the day.
I have that too.
Oh, you do? Yeah. So I have one or two that are period pieces, and I really am drawn to that genre. So yes, I would consider it.
I mean, the way you describe clothes, first of all, come on. Congratulations, Susan. Hi, Gigi from Mercedes. You've talked about how themes from your nonfiction research has influenced your fiction writing. Are any of your characters based on people you know or have met in your research? We talked about this a little bit. This is from David Ressler.
So the characters are not based on people I know, but they're based on women I've interviewed and which are composited in some ways. For instance, in the book on sisters, there were sisters who had carried their infertile sisters' babies. And that was the ultimate, and that chapter was about the ultimate act of sisterhood and what an altruistic act.
Yes.
And so I had listened to women talking about that. And then I had also done a study years ago on fertility and on women who were hired surrogates. And I listened to something very different in the reasons they did it. And so I thought about all of that in the beginning pages of this novel.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's so complex, the choices that the sisters make, so complex. Okay. Do any of the characters, I think we answered this, but do any of the characters from A Palm Beach Wife continue into the new novel? You answered, this is from David Linton. I just want to ask you that again.
Well, the answer to that is that there are a few scenes in A Palm Beach Scandal where we see Faith Harrison, who was the protagonist in A Palm Beach Wife. And she's the owner of Vintage Tales. And there's a woman, and because it's multi-generational, there's a woman who is named Mrs. A. That's what she's called.
Yes, I noticed that. Yes, yes.
Right. And Mrs. A does appear on these pages. She does.
Yes.
Yeah.
We saw her again. I was like, there she is. This is from someone whose name does not appear. As a highly successful author across nonfiction and novels, how do you approach and think of research for a fiction project versus nonfiction?
The research. Well, in this novel, I think this is really a literary technique. It's certainly not unique to my book. There are real places and there are fictive places. Mm-hmm. So, yes. You're going to the Breakers Hotel. I mean, who could beat that? But there is a fictive museum that might remind you of the Norton. And so I mixed it.
Yes.
And that's really something that in order to do that, I still research the places. I know them so well because of my time in Palm Beach, but I wanted to just make sure that everything was authentic. So you always look at that. But the research for nonfiction for my books is pretty layered because I look at very serious treatises and I look at pop culture in order to substantiate what I'm writing about.
Right.
So, you don't need to do it to that level, but definitely listening to women's voices for nonfiction really puts it in my head for the fiction.
Oh, I can't. I think that is fantastic. What a great resource for you.
It really is.
Mercedes told us the audio and video froze 5 minutes ago. I think we're okay now, though. Hopefully.
I don't know.
Hopefully our faces look good when we're frozen. When did you begin to get interested in relationships, and what helped you decide to pursue gender studies? This is from Linda Feaster.
I have long been intrigued by how women navigate a path in our society. I watched my mother, who was such a typical 50s, 60s wife, that it never occurred to her that she should have the career that she really deserved based on her intellect and her ambition. And you notice these things really resonate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's so interesting. My great-grandmother worked, my grandmother worked, and my mom had a long career.
Oh, so but weren't they kind of anomalies, Gigi?
Yes, my grandmother was in the first graduating class from UCLA. But they're both teachers.
But that's great.
Isn't that interesting?
It's great.
And my father stayed home, ex-staff sergeant, and raised 4 girls.
Yeah, but you said
Whoa.
that, and that must have been very unusual.
It's so unusual.
Yeah.
I think we think like little boys, though. Okay, what surprised you most? This is from an anonymous question about the experience of writing fiction versus nonfiction.
In fiction, you really own your story. Your characters can do whatever you want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the real life interviews, you must be really honoring everything that these women report. I mean, it's
Right.
really a journalistic endeavor. And, I don't tape women, so I take very serious notes, and I go over it again with the women and make sure it's okay. And with a novel, it's like you can do what you want. You imagine the character as you do. It's really very different.
Do you feel protective over, you must feel protective over the women, the real life women you've interviewed?
I do. I once said to someone, just recently, that someone told me a secret. And I said, you can count on me. I have made a living promising women that what they tell me will be a secret. I would never reveal identity. Women get to change their identities and so forth in order to do the interview. They give a different name, choose a different town.
Well, I think you make a great therapist if you ever want to go into something else. Let's see. Good question. When can we expect to see the Netflix series based on your novels? This is from Rob Marcus.
Oh, well, that's very nice of Rob Marcus to ask.
We want to see it.
The answer would be soonest, Rob. Yeah, that would be great.
I mean, we are all looking now, I think especially now, for escapist fare, because the world has gotten so serious and so scary that movies like the Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston, Adam Sandler, and
I watched one of those recently.
I love it.
Of course, there's no question that we want to be transported.
Yes.
And while this book is a dramatic story, it transports you because it's not your story and it's not the everyday news. I think that women are really, as readers, they say women read a lot more than men do in terms of fiction, but we're looking for stories that, and of course, something like an Adam Sandler movie is great to do and a great way to lighten up.
But it was Monte Carlo that drew me in. It was like a comedy.
I saw that movie recently too.
Isn't that funny?
That's funny, yeah.
I was like, I want to be on that boat. That's all I'm asking. Please take me away. Last question. How has your fiction writing and research changed your view of women in history?
I am profoundly affected by my own research. As I said, really, because
I believe it.
Whenever I've wanted to write a nonfiction book, especially in the early stages of my career, it was the book that I didn't see in the bookstore. So, for example, when I got married in my early 20s for the first time, and I was spending time with my mother-in-law, who I really did love. But it was very complicated. I went to Barnes and Noble, as one did in those days, and there were no books on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. So I wondered. So the question was, how many women really feel like this as daughters-in-law, and how many mothers-in-law have their own feelings, and why isn't there a study so that you can look and see and identify with certain scenarios? So I wrote the book. When I moved to Connecticut in the early 90s, I was taking the commuter train to New York for the day. And this is why the truth is stranger than fiction. I was listening to women, maybe in their late 20s, sitting right behind me, talking about one of the women was getting married, who can make this up, like the next week, but she was still kind of seeing her old boyfriend. Then I
Okay.
got to a birthday lunch with a bunch of girlfriends, and one of them confided that she was having an affair. And I thought, you know what? How could it be that in the last 2 hours, I've heard about unfaithful women? And so when I did the study, it really informed me, and I thought it was worth other women having access to that information because it really interested me. So I think that for every book I've written, writing Tripping the Prom Queen about female rivalry
That's a
made,
great title. Another one.
thank you, but it really
Fantastic.
made me really question why. And by then I'd been teaching at Marymount a long time, and as a gender professor, and I was really looking with my students at a lot of research and just for the textbooks, and I was really paying attention to the positioning of women in society and how much there's male supremacy in terms of what choices women make, and that it's really applied to this novel.
It truly is. It's interesting that you write about things that you would want to see and that you did not see in the world.
Well, how about my book on second wives? We were talking about being divorced and remarried.
Yes.
I mean, there was nothing there, and I thought that I needed a guidebook. I was the second wife even the first time I got married.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
yeah, so why not have a guidebook? Why not identify? And so when I think about it for fiction, I really feel that my research informs me, but it's also so curious how much women endure.
Yes, we are, and we're so strong.
So strong.
So strong. Absolutely.
Really, it's true.
I think on that note, I think we're done with the questions and everything.
I think what's beautiful lately is the sense of camaraderie between women.
Yeah.
And how they're working together a lot more than they used to. I think so many things are changing. I mean, so many things are changing for the worse, but so many things are changing for the better.
Well, I
too.
think because there's less fear, because there used to be so few women. There's so few slots for women.
Yes.
So now that's expanded, and I think that as it does even more so, I think we all can relax and really go for it without tearing somebody else down.
And the more that women support each other, the more power they'll have.
Agreed.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
So I consider you friends already.
Ah.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Please, viewers, everyone watching from everywhere, remember you can order a Palm Beach Scandal by just pressing the green button at the bottom of the screen. You can order Gigi's books too, any books you might want. And I look forward to seeing both of you in real life.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Christina. Gigi, thank you so much. What a treat to be with you.
I am so pleased to have been asked and to be here. Mwah.
And until then, stay safe, keep writing. Our best regards to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Mwah.